Hi everyone, this is the Tuesday, January 26th, Jupyter IPython dev meeting, and we should go ahead. I was fiddling with BlueJeans, so I don't have the agenda open, so while I open it, whoever's first on it, please go ahead.
Steve, do we have Steve? No, we don't.
Steve, I see Steve Sylvester is up.
Chris is second. Let's go with Chris while Steve is going to connect.
Yeah, we can swing back to Steve. So I spent last week working on the APIs for massaging the APIs for menus as we basically it turns out to be a pretty challenging problem to expose an API that is both sensible and easy to understand, and at the same time allows you enough flexibility in the context of like a plugin based application where you have multiple plugins wanting to contribute items to the menu bar. So still working on that problem. I think there's light at the end of the tunnel there. But that is taking me more time than I expected, just because it ends up being one of those problems that seems simple on the surface and is actually quite complex once you dig into it. So that's where my time's going. Hopefully by next week we'll have something to actually show there. But that's basically it for me. Oh, and that's actually the last main visual widget piece that we're missing for the Jupyter Lab initial cut of the Jupyter Lab outside of a notebook, even though we do have actually kind of sort of a working notebook already going that Jason Brown has put together. But that's the menus are basically the last missing piece until we can say that, hey, the first initial version is done. So.
Okay, I guess
have you been getting feedback, Chris, from Jason or from someone on that API, or has it been mostly you iterating on your own?
For the menus API?
Yeah, for the
oh yeah, I've been talking to everybody about it. Anybody that will listen and basically jump down that rabbit hole with me, I've been roping into the conversation. So
okay, including his cat. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Jason, are you in 2 meetings at the same time?
Am I in 2 meetings?
You were in Appier and Jupyter just before.
Right. Steve and I just realized that the main meeting was going on, so we postponed our conversation.
I think I just saw Steve show up. You want to go?
Steve, are you around?
I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, my next?
Yeah. You were actually first on the agenda, so go for it.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I've been working on the Jupyter Lab and associated plugins for that, improvements to the file browser, mostly the past week. Now in discussion with Jason and how to handle the notebook sessions and execution. That's about it.
I guess it's me. A couple of upcoming release things. IPython Parallel is about ready for a 5.0, I think. The futures-based API is pretty much there, and the main other thing that makes it a 5.0 is moving some of the Python object serialization stuff out of the kernel package and into the Parallel stuff where it's actually used. So that's just about ready to release. The other upcoming release is Jupyter Hub, which may or may not be ready for a release. The main question, so there are kind of 2 things I'm planning to release together in Jupyter Hub. One is the form for users to express input on how their servers should start. And the other, which is related to that, is users being able to have more than one server at a time, which starts to make sense once the users can say, I want to start this server in this way. Mm-hmm. They may want to start multiple servers in different ways at the same time.
Yeah.
But because the latter change is a database schema update, it's a much more substantial modification that's going to take a fair amount of work and a fair amount of time to make sure that it's a smooth transition with Alembic database migration stuff. But the form exists and is already useful, and there have been some other improvements. So I'm thinking maybe what makes the most sense is to actually cut a release as it is now, and then start work on the multiple server thing rather than wait for that to cut the next release. So I think it's mainly just having a conversation sometime to make a decision on which side that should fall.
So
and the other
basically,
thing that I wanted,
people would be able to specify one, but they could specify and modify their selection, but there will only be one active at a given time for now.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. So basically,
But
so
could they, if they shut it down, could they go and change and start a different new one? So at least, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's already an
So
improvement.
you can run your notebook job on you could run your notebook GPU job or your notebook on this experiment, and then stop doing that, and then run your notebook on a different environment. You just wouldn't be able to do both at once.
Okay.
But because there's URL stuff, it's relatively substantial to add that, especially since
I can imagine. Yeah.
it always takes forever.
That assumption was hard coded initially. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, you already can at the database layer. You can have multiple servers per user. It's mostly at the URL scheme and stuff where we assume there's only one result when you query for servers with a given user. We always assume that there's only one result. But there would be at least one schema change that would require setting up the migration and stuff, which we need to be careful with. And then the other thing is the Quantopian folks are still using Jupyter Hub with where the single user servers are based on IPython 3. And I would like to stop allowing that. I'm working on something right now that would be a lot simpler if I don't have to implement it for both IPython 3 and Jupyter. So that's another reason that I would like to release 0.4 as the last version that officially supports IPython notebook servers, and then drop support for that in the next in 0.5, I guess.
Sounds like a pretty reasonable plan.
Yep. And then Matthias and I, until about half an hour ago, were recording an episode of the Talk Python to Me podcast, which was a fun and interesting conversation about IPython and Jupyter stuff that should come out next Tuesday. And then the other thing that I was doing a bit last week, but haven't in the last few days, is exploring some of the caching issues with, or not caching issues, but caching would be the solution to some GitHub rate limiting stuff that's happening on NBViewer. We've hit the rate limit a few times, somewhat regularly in the last few weeks. I think just due to, I don't know if there are a couple workshops going on that are hitting it a lot, or if it's just getting more popular and this is becoming a regular occurrence. But the main way to
the 5,000 an hour,
5,000 per hour. The main the caching we do right now on NBViewer is extremely primitive, and it's kind of all or nothing. We cache a rendered notebook or nothing at all. We don't cache the results of any upstream GitHub API requests. And so we can probably reduce some of that load by.
There was a notebook that was on the front page of Hacker News over the weekend.
Yeah, maybe it was Peter. No, that wouldn't. Peter never doesn't cause us to hit GitHub.
It's always Peter.
Well, but he doesn't since he hosts his notebooks. They don't result in GitHub API requests. But they could drive more traffic to NBViewer in general.
Yeah.
The weird thing is that the average traffic on NBViewer is much lower than, is lower than before notebook were rendered on GitHub. So we shouldn't hit that rate.
But there could be still spikes. Also possible that this is a per hour limit. So all it takes is a spike from something hitting a GitHub notebook within an hour, and that's it. You hit the rate limit, because the rate limit is per hour. It's not integrated over longer periods.
Yeah, and one thing I did to mitigate it a little bit was our default caching numbers were very small. By default, we only cache a notebook for 10 minutes. And just in the meantime, while we figure this out, I turned up those knobs so that we cache by default for at least half an hour, just to slightly slightly reduce the number of requests we make. But I think we're going to need to work on some of the upstream caching to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's about what I've been working on. Yep.
Now, just to check, we're still using the authenticated one, so you're not hitting the 60 an hour limit. You're hitting the 5,000 an hour.
We hit that in about a minute.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, no, that because of the way, part of it is that we play very, rendering a regular notebook results in actually a few API requests.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually something that we could probably improve on. But we do some checks for whether we should do redirects by essentially asking GitHub, is this a notebook? So rendering a notebook is not one API request. I think it ends up being 3. And I think we might be able to kind of anticipate what's likely to happen and then maybe get that down to 1 or 2 in most cases and, just bias a little bit more. I haven't looked at, and that's one thing that might have changed recently is I think there have been some changes in terms of adding more, I think the tree view now lists more branches and so requests more information because each page is not necessarily one GitHub API request. It can be a few.
Mm-hmm.
And adding more information to the tree view, for instance, means more GitHub API requests per page view.
There's a few other cases as well that can be pretty gnarly. If people have branches or whatever that have slashes in them, that generates a whole mess of API calls because the GitHub HTML URL scheme doesn't exactly match up with the API URL scheme, so we can't just do it. But it came up enough times. But yeah, segue. I guess I'm the next guy. So looking on that as well, looking for some cheap ways to get it everywhere, because if we're going to start caching GitHub more aggressively, then let's cache Peter Norvig's site more aggressively and everything else. They all use the same Tornado client down at the bottom of the stack, so we should be able to just flip something down at the bottom of that layer. Also, I found out it's really hard to run NBViewer on OS X with all the things enabled for it because the packages are annoying to build. But that is all.
I thought Conda was solving that.
Say again?
I thought with Conda you could install everything. You should be able to just Conda install NBViewer, right?
It's pretty close. Yeah, it's pretty close. It's just we don't have an environment file in there. And so on OS X, you got to run down a couple libraries for pylibmc and New Relic and other weird things that have binary dependencies. They're in there. They're just, we've never configured it that way.
Yeah, and we used to, for local testing, just have it so that you could not have those.
Yeah, that's probably the right way to be as a default case. But yeah, and that kind of segues into the other part too, about talking about either alternatives to NBViewer or best practices for deploying NBViewer internally, or is it really, do you just need a cron job? Do you not actually need the full notebook viewer? So started that document with Carol about, so you want to host some notebooks, right? And capture some of the things that we've learned from various deployments. But if anybody's interested in that, it's going to be not that huge of an effort to document it, but to start offering compelling options for people to securely host arbitrary content is not nothing. Or not even securely, just not completely ridiculously insecurely would be my preference. So working on that. Min shamed me into bringing the entry points PR back from the dead, and because it's just been sitting there, and all kinds of things have happened in the near term or in the meantime. Lots of API changes at the top level. So that's going to basically be a clean slate restart of that effort if we get that. But it's still a really good thing to get in there. It's just no one's been pushing real hard on the formats or providers recently, so we haven't pushed that through as hard. Over on NB Present, I now have a NB Convert model that will generate presentations fully, with all of their dependencies injected into them. For those that I can, like QGrid, I don't know what to do about QGrid, and a couple other ones where they by default use CDA on upstream. So I've been tagging along on that. That builds up on Conda for OS X and Linux. Getting all the Conda stuff working across Windows and Linux and everything is very exciting, but that may drive the access to some new, more regularly rebuilt JavaScript packages on Conda. But that's more of a development thing than a user thing. Trying to bring some more notebook rendering love to the Anaconda Cloud offering, which is interesting because we are solving the social problem and the user problem, and trying to do some standards around metadata as based on that workflow. So that's going pretty well. On the diff stuff, haven't worked so much on that, but still tracking to what is happening over on NBDime. And I'm looking at some other options for how to show the differences between notebooks. And purely off topic, I've been working with someone that's putting together a binder and GitHub and Gitter based class mechanism where you can basically just drop a notebook on, everyone gets their URL, they run it, then they can have an embedded Gitter channel inside of their notebook with just a little bit of work, which is actually really cute when you're working with a bunch of people. So seeing how that develops, but that could be pretty fun. That's about it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Documentation, thank you, everybody, for your support, and we've been getting some good stuff done. I've been reviewing some of the NB Sphinx stuff, and that actually looks promising. There's a few issues that I ran into when I was trying to use it to convert all our notebook documents as a trial run, but I think those will get worked out. Lots of good anecdotal feedback from 2.5 days of the booth, talking to people at scale, and there's still a relatively low name recognition of Jupyter among general Python attendees. And a lot of those folks, when told, oh, yeah, it's IPython notebook, they're like, oh, I know that. What was interesting was that the notebook resonated particularly well with middle school and high school girls because they liked having the example code, the inclusion of a mix of writing, media, and they really liked the collaboration aspect of the notebook. So I'm going to be working with some students here at Cal Poly to see if we can't move and get some notebooks as somebody's senior project more aimed at that target group. And I'm also going to look at the way Sentry does their federated docs. I know people don't want Git submodules, but I've been playing around with it, and it actually works pretty well now that the other baseline docs are more consistent and cleaned up. So that's it.
What do you mean by the collaboration aspect? So we don't have real-time collaboration. Yeah, what did you said they were particularly interested in the collaboration aspect of the notebook.
What they were doing were they were using it like together amongst 3 or 4 people, and so it's sort of like more like collaborating within a group, and then also the concept of sharing the notebooks, and even without being able to edit it all simultaneously, they found very appealing.
Yeah, I think what that flags is that this is an area where the need and interest is huge. Even as primitive as our current capabilities are, which they are very primitive, it's already a compelling and important use case. So obviously, anything we do on that front will have a lot of impact and value, because even as very, very limited as it is right now, people still find that useful.
Yeah, and just what more detail you thought about NB Sphinx. I'm not sure everybody who listens know what it is. Someone made a PR basically where Notebook can directly be integrating in Sphinx without doing the Notebook to RST conversion first. So it's just a Sphinx plugin, and then it recognizes your notebooks. It's still in progress. It's not even in a Jupyter repo. It's someone else's project. Will probably contribute. Just for the record.
Okay, I think I'm next, unless we have more discussion about Carol's work. Okay, so I don't have many interesting things to say because I've been busy with college and things, but mostly continuing Jupyter Day planning work, which has been going well. We're fleshing out a code of conduct and doing another marketing push, and then just starting to deal with logistical details here and there. I'm giving a talk on kernels and the Jupyter messaging protocol in 2 weeks. So going through our existing documentation, just prepping up something fun about that. And that's pretty much it for me. Hopefully I will be back and contributing more after either this week or in 2 weeks, whenever professors decide to stop giving homework, if that ever happens. I think
Cool.
Sylvian is next. Oh, John is
No, I
next,
think I
sorry.
am.
Yes, you're next, John.
No problem. No problem. So last week, I mentioned I was working on something that took live widgets and serialized them to the notebook as static representations, screenshots of those widgets. That got merged. So if any of you guys are running on master, you can play with that. This week, I am working on the small split. I opened that PR yesterday.
Hey John, which is that on the IPyWidgets repo or
the screenshot persistence PR? Yeah, it is, and it's been merged. So if you work, if you're running master, you can play with it.
Yeah,
it actually adds a little.
What repo it was. With the split, it's always good to remind people which repo you'd have to pull from, because right now we all get lost.
Good point. Good point. But yeah, if you do end up pulling that, it will add like a little widgets menu to the menu bar, and you can activate that feature using that menu.
Okay.
So this week I'm working on the small split, which is similar to the big split, but it's just IPyWidgets. I'm actually taking the JavaScript out of IPyWidgets and making a language agnostic version of the widgets. We're still kind of unsure of what to do with the JavaScript. There is some notebook specific JavaScript. Sylvan brought up that maybe it shouldn't live with the rest of the widget JavaScript. Maybe it should live with the notebook JavaScript. So inside Jupyter/notebook, maybe it should live in its own separate package. I don't know. We're still discussing that, trying to figure out what the best thing is to do with that JavaScript. I've also drafted the 5.0 release stock. I'm just kind of trying to keep track of things that are happening in the widgets, so when we do release 5.0, we can provide a somewhat comprehensive doc that will help people migrate to the latest version of IPyWidgets, so we don't have too many angry people. And this week, I will be working on updating all of the widget docs with rendered screenshots and animated GIFs. I will be using that PR that I mentioned earlier to do that.
And I'm also kind of just preparing IPY widgets for a 5.0 release, maybe in the next week or a few weeks. And yeah, that's it for me.
I guess it's my turn. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So the first item is some work that I did in Jupyter.js widgets, on IPy widgets, regarding some cleanup for the small split to come, which was also required for the work of Jason and the widget support in the new notebook. And this included a PR that was very, I would say, long to do, which was to provide the JavaScript default values for every single widget model so that we can more easily instantiate them from the JavaScript side without having to request default values from the backend. And also transitioning to use the Neutralets API in IPy widgets. That's it. Jason, it's your turn.
Yep, I think I'm next. Two main things working with the Foster-based notebook. We had a static notebook renderer, and I got code execution working very minimally. I'm going to use some of the work that they pushed in the last week to make it respond to key presses and things. Thanks to the work that Sylvan and John did, we also have widgets very, very minimally working, as in when you execute a widget, a cell that creates a widget, it just puts the widget up at the top of the notebook. It doesn't try to put it anywhere in the output or anything, but there is a slider that appears and it slides. So progress there. And then just general working with Steve and Sylvan and whoever else with the new notebook. Which reminds me, I have some thoughts about how to deal with widgets and things like that in the new notebook. I'd like to have a discussion afterwards at some other time with whoever's interested.
Yeah, Sylvan and I are planning on having a meeting after this. Do you want to join in?
Oh, yeah, let's do that.
I'll be there too.
Okay, and I think that's about it.
Okay, I think it's me next. So last week finished off the key mapping shortcut stuff. That's all now in and Fossified and Jupyter services been updated. And this week's basically updating the demo app, Fossified example, or the Jupyter.js plugins example based on what we're doing. Just spruce it up and make it a little bit better. That's it for me. All right.
Hi. So yeah, last week I was finishing up the command palette and needed a fairly substantial refactor because of the new command interface. Basically, we just had to iterate on that a few times, but I think now we've got it in a good spot. And this week I am sort of doing theming and also talking through the menu stuff that Chris mentioned before, and whatever else comes up. But yeah, that's it for me. Who's next?
Gino and Peter.
Gino.
Gino.
All right. Yeah. Hi guys. Let's see. So, kind of a global status in terms of the majority of our the Jupyter extensions that we have in Incubator. We put a new release for all of them, basically changing the way the installation steps. We based it out of MB Grader. I guess there was someone complained about us dumping stuff in their home directory and when we were doing pip install, and so we make some changes there. Let's see, in the declarative widgets, we have a big PR that went in that basically enabled persistence of I guess you can call it state using local storage, kind of similar to what IPyWidgets I think does for other widgets. But basically, in our case, all our important state is really stored in binding variables, the data that's in a channel that you use for binding, and so that's all. We didn't have to change any of our widgets to support persistence. You basically store the binding variables in local storage, and when you refresh, that stuff comes back, which is kind of cool. So basically, all Polymer widgets can take advantage of persistence by just being part of the notebook template. Pete put a release on kernel gateway out, and he has a blog post that links to demos of its capabilities just to update people. And he'll put a link out on the group just to let people know. We got a couple folks working on basic standalone dashboard using the new Jupyter -Splat components. I think they put out a call that they got stuff to do, but they put out a call that they need a release RC1 of Phosphor widgets because there's some bug fixes that are there. They just need those fixes to be tagged so they can build them in. And we also want to play with Jupyter Labs. I think we try to follow some of the instructions that were talked about last week. The Jupyter.js notebook. We were not able to get it running, but if there's something else that's come out, it'll be nice to somehow mail some instructions, or maybe let me know where should I be looking at for instructions of how to get that going so we can take a peek.
Can you just hit us up in our Phosphor room on Gitter, and we'll make sure you get that running.
Awesome, we'll do that. And that's pretty much it. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I think I'm next. So I was hammering on IPython 4.1 with Thomas and Min. Likely try to release beta or even RC today, tomorrow, because we didn't have a lot of feedback and most of issues are closed. Trying to document the release process because it's always hard to remember all the steps. Trying to think that it should be nice to completely automatize the release process on each repo, because there are still a lot of steps to do manually. I discussed a bit with Brian about retrying to launch a Jupyter newsletter. I'm not sure how we would do that, something which would be both on the blog and you can subscribe to receive emails. Monthly basis probably at the beginning. The question is, how do we collect and how do we format the thing in public, something which is sufficiently accessible for non-technical people. Brian is thinking of a hackpad, and someone would format the hackpad and post it regularly, probably Anna at Cal Poly. Slowly trying to get used to use the migration issue script that Min wrote. Again, I think it would be interesting to investigate having an actual bot that you can ping on GitHub that would do the migration for you, or even to backport PR, because now we need to backport, and it would be nice to say, hey, hat your bot, migrate issue to, or backport this PR somewhere else, instead of having to pass the issue number in terminal. It's probably doable. There are some bots written in Python around that are getting tracked. The only problem is you need to maintain the boats, which could be hosted somewhere. And also administrative stuff that are completely boring, so I won't bring up here. And that's it. Next is Thomas.
Hello. So as anyone subscribed to the IPython repo has probably seen today, I've been trawling through old issues, trying to bring the count of issues down a little bit, of open issues. I've also been working on various bits and bobs, including hating the tracebacks when you get a recursion traceback. So rather than getting the full sort of 1,000 frames displaying in your terminal, it shows you the top view and then it says, and the last n are repeated. And I've also finally started writing the Jupyter paper. So there is a private GitHub repo for that. If anybody's interested in collaborating on that, let me know and I'll add you to the repo. I've added several people already. And I'm sure you've all gone, oh yes, that's a great idea, and then forgotten about it again.
No, we can't forget about it. We need that out. So I'm glad you're leading the charge on this. This is super important.
I actually tweeted that we were writing a paper, and that the first author might be one of the authors could be just Jupyter developers, and it seems to please a lot of people on on Twitter at least.
No, absolutely. I mean, the AstroPy paper was written that way, with the lead author being the AstroPy team, and I think it's the right thing to do. But thank you, Thomas, because this is something that has fallen through the cracks already too many times. So if having someone mind the problem will make a big difference. Thank you.
No problem.
Damian is next. Damian, are you connected? Fernando, do you see Damian connected?
Let me check.
Yeah. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Well, essentially, last week, but of this week, I was working in some NB extensions, particularly in one extension to support our kernel specs on the fly when we detect they are executable, but also in some other internal extension that I hope will be publishing or making public really soon. I have also looking into some NP convert issues. I am trying to figure out what is happening related mostly with the slides, and start to look in the PR 879, which is a really important PR about NP extension and NP config. And so I am testing our extensions on that PR and trying to figure out if we need something else upstream to support our use case. That's the main thing.
And Fernando, I think you're
next.
Yes.
So I've mostly been focused on hiring staff. We've been interviewing postdocs, and hopefully within a couple of weeks we'll have something to report on that front. We also have the candidates for the project manager. Those interviews will be coming next. We had some discussions about Jupyter and education here at Berkeley. It turns out that the data8.org course for data science at UC Berkeley is using Jupyter Hub pretty heavily, and this semester it's now ramped up to about 500 students. So we're beginning to see a pretty substantial use case in terms of stress testing the system and also giving us feedback about things that work and don't work in a large educational environment. So we had some discussions with that team, some discussions with nuclear engineers at LBL in Berkeley who are deploying community sensors for environmental data monitoring and community knowledge of their environment. And it's basically a bunch of small devices that have Python APIs that could run on Raspberry Pis, that could be hosted for high school students and schools basically to do science and learn about their environment, potentially working with Jupyter. And so that's kind of an ongoing conversation that I have here at LBL. I want to ask who in this meeting is up to speed with, not to have this discussion now, but just so I know and I can talk to you offline about Python for HPC. I've been having lots of discussions at LBL about kind of pushing on the Python and supercomputing environments kind of things. And I know that Aaron Amadia and some folks at Continuum a while back had worked on this. I don't know if anybody who's in the call is up to speed on this, on kind of the state of problems in spinning up Python in massive supercomputing environments, performance issues, initializations of the interpreter, dynamic loading. There's a raft of questions on that, and I've been a little bit out of the loop on that problem for the last year or so. But there's potentially we're hitting critical mass on that problem at various supercomputing facilities in the country. So if anyone here in the call, or Min, if you're at Simula, or
there are people here
okay,
who are varying levels of scientists interested, and the HPC department here who are working on that. So I can talk to various people here.
Let's talk about that. And any of the Continuum, I know that the bulk of the people from Continuum who are here are not so much on the HPC side, but do you guys know what the state of kind of your state of play on that problem is? If not, I can try to bug others.
Yeah, so Fernando, Aaron is still a great contact on that front for sure. He continues to be involved with the Python HPC kind of efforts, supercomputing and whatnot. I have worked heavily in that domain, but I'm not currently working heavily in that domain. So Do you have questions right now, or do you just want to know names? Because Aaron's a great name to talk to, and he'd be happy to speak with you. And I could make
no, I don't want to drag. I don't want. It's kind of a big rabbit hole, so I didn't want to drag the conversation into the specifics. Just find out who would be the current people at the various places to talk to. It's a long discussion, so I don't want to have it right now. I just wanted basically the contact names. So I'll start with Aaron, and maybe he can pull in somebody else. I figured he was my good to-go person at Continuum, but I wasn't sure. Thanks. And Gino, I don't know if you guys at IBM have a big involvement in more sort of really what one would call kind of HPC and the supercomputing sense environments. But if you're interested in that, obviously happy to talk to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I can ping around some folks, see if we can find contacts too that might be more closely working in that area.
Yeah, if they're interested. I mean, this is more of a kind of like a Cray supercomputer class problem, but the national labs are very interested in and there's probably critical mass for funding and large-scale projects on this front, so I want to restart that. And yes, Carol, Andrea's a good person to loop in, actually. You're right. It's a good reminder. I just met with him 2 weeks ago in San Diego, so it's a good reminder to loop him into that chat. Thanks. And finally, we had a good talk by Paco Nathan about a lot of things that they're doing with Jupyter at O'Reilly here. I mean, it was a talk about other things in data science, but he had some interesting notes about Jupyter, all the work that they've been doing on TV and other things at O'Reilly. And so that talk, I was looking for a link to add, but the video is not up yet, but I'll add it to the Hackpad as soon as BIDS posts the video online. And that's it for me. Jess, you're next.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm back after my long hiatus of being in my quals hole, but I passed my qualifying exams yesterday, so I'm back, and now we'll be busy catching up with NVGrader issues that I've let slide in the past few months. But.
So one note that I just remembered for you, maybe now that you're back, to maybe if you have a minute to make a PR against the main website, so that there's visible links to the Jupyter and Education mailing list. I've realized that mailing list is indexed nowhere. So unless people happen to know about it because they saw you at SciPy, there's no obvious way to know that list exists because there's nothing anywhere that actually says there is a Jupyter and Education mailing list and group. So having it linked in a couple of places would be a good idea. I had meant to tell you that. Okay, we got a few minutes. Does anybody who hasn't spoken have anything that they'd like to bring up? No?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, please.
Min, you were working on SockJS fallbacks?
I was, yes.
Did anything ever happen with that?
I've been busy with other things, but let me at least get that into a less gross state so that I can hand it off.
Okay, sounds good.
Hopefully I can do that in the next day or two.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Last call?
Any word on the dev meeting?
Anna is running a poll and kind of collating that and talking to people, but I haven't spoken to Anna recently, and since she's at Cal Poly, Brian sees her more regularly than I do, so I don't have anything more up to date other than she has collated the responses and is looking for dates.
Yep, some people did not had responded last time, so did everyone receive a mail from Anna and did respond with their data availability?
Yeah, or anyone who wants to and was not in that loop, please contact either. I mean, if you have Anna's email, she has already shared it with the list, and if not, I can give it to you.
Hey, Fernando, I have an outstanding request to add Darian to the list. I think Anna said she was going to reach out to one of you guys to get the permission. I don't know if that happened or anything. But
yeah, I think Darian, did you get the poll, the doodle poll?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I'll double check with Anna because we had already talked about it.
Okay, great.
And so I'll make sure that Anna sends you the doodle poll, or I can just forward you the link. I'll do it right now. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Anything else? All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you again online or on the chat rooms or on the mailing list or next week. Bye, everybody.